What's up, wrestling fans? Two Bros Wrestling Show coming at you on a Sunday night. I almost said Saturday night, but that's not right. What's happening, Kevin?
I, I, what's happening is Backlash was on the Saturday night,
Yes, it was. That's why I was
and
confused.
that is our main event topic tonight. Is that we will be reviewing Backlash, seeing how our predictions hold up from our show last week and what we thought of the event itself. Before we get too far into things, though, we just want to say for all the mothers who may be watching, also very much a happy Mother's Day from the Two Bros Wrestling Show.
Mm-hmm.
And for the rest of you, watch us and then call your mother if you haven't already.
Yes.
Yeah. Make sure you finish this show, but definitely call mom because, you have to finish the show. You have to have something to talk to her about. So,
or watch the show with your mom. We will accept that as well.
We definitely would appreciate that. All on separate devices because, the viewer count.
Streaming, and such. Algorithms.
Before we do anything, though, there's that opening bell. And a little bit of advertising at the end there.
All right. Nice.
Yeah, Doug and I were talking about this right before we hit the air. We have some breaking news in our news segment, and unfortunately, it is not pleasant news to relay if you haven't heard. Today, we lost Sabu, the legendary hardcore icon. And Doug, I think that we oftentimes in the wrestling business use the word legend maybe a little loosely. Everyone's a superstar, everyone's a legend, but I think there's no way that this is not an apropos descriptor for the legacy of Sabu, especially if you're a fan of the hardcore style of wrestling. You talk top tier ECW. It's when I think ECW, I think Rob Van Dam and then Sabu.
Yeah. Van Dam and Sabu, who I believe got pulled over close to here when they did a show back in the day, and had to have some court dates because of that pullover in this area. But
very true. However you want to look at the hardcore style and what you think of ECW, that was revolutionary, obviously changed the business. We wouldn't have an NWO. We wouldn't have a DX. There would have been no Attitude Era if it had not been for ECW. There's no doubt in my mind that Vince's cartoon style of pro wrestling would have continued had ECW not changed the game, and Sabu was a huge part of that. And when you say
was
legendary for hardcore style, he was trained by the original Sheik, who was his uncle, who was probably the first true hardcore wrestler that wrestled that brand of wrestling almost exclusively. But it's easy to dismiss maybe the work of Sabu as just one of those ECW guys that was just hardcore and barbed wire and blood, and he was that. But he also was high flying too. There was a high flying style that was not seen much in American wrestling at the time of his work in ECW. Doug, do you have any memories of Sabu or thoughts when you first saw Sabu and the work that he did?
Correct me if I'm wrong here. This may be just like a fabricated memory at this point, but I remember right around 2000-ish or so, we were at a TNA taping, and I actually got to see Sabu live with.
Oh yeah, we did
with the. For some reason, I'm thinking he tag team with the Himalayan player, the player from the Himalayas, Sanjay Dutt. Is this right, or am I just mixing this all together?
I don't remember who he teamed with, but we definitely saw him in person. I'd forgotten about that. And that's something that maybe we should point out, too, is that he did wrestle for TNA. He did wrestle briefly for WWE, as you referenced earlier, when he was pulled over with Van Dam around here. He was with WWE at the time. But no doubt about it that the work that he'll long be remembered for was that decade of the 90s and changing the game with ECW. He broke his body down, obviously, with the style that he wrestled. And so by the time he was in WWE, there wasn't the same spring to his step that he once had. But when he was in ECW, he was a 2-time ECW world champ. He was a 3-time ECW tag champ. He held their version of the television title. So he was an ECW Triple Crown champion, and was only 60 years old. No cause of death released. He just wrestled Joey Janela last month in a retirement match, and a month later comes the word that he has passed. So just shocking when I heard that news today.
Absolutely.
I mean, shocking is maybe a good word to always use with Sabu. I think that was probably my first reaction of seeing him. I don't know if it was, I don't remember if it was one of the matches he had with RVD. Maybe it was one of the ones he had with maybe I saw him with Jerry Lynn or Super Crazy. I saw some combination of Sabu doing some stuff that was like, I remember watching the tapes, because back then that's what you did when you didn't get ECW, and my mind being blown, like, this is something that's possible in pro wrestling.
Sabu definitely ahead of his time. What is it, like the early 90s, 92, 93, 94, maybe into 95-ish there. Saw Paul Heyman talking about him. It wasn't a recent interview he did, but he was doing a Q&A, and somebody asked him who deserves more credit than he actually got. And of course, the first and only person he mentions is Sabu, because by the time he got to a point where he was in front of a larger audience, he had broken down his body both inside and unfortunately outside the ring, to a point where he couldn't go like he could in the early days of ECW. But when he could go, he could go. Even when we saw him like in the early 2000s live, it was a sight to behold, the homicidal, genocidal, suicidal maniac.
Death-defying maniac.
Yeah.
Truly deserving of the word legend. Big loss to the professional wrestling industry. So our condolences to the family first and foremost, as well as the friends, and of course the legions of fans of us out there who appreciated Sabu's work over the years. Let's transition to some follow-up stories. Something a little, well, I would say brighter. Anything's brighter than death, but we are going to follow up on the rash of WWE releases that we talked about last week. And that's because typically the way these things go are, the company wishes folks well on their future endeavors. Everyone says all the right things and on their social medias and stuff. Yeah, this one is hitting a little different, because people didn't want to burn those bridges. They wanted to come back, and there's many instances of, if you play the game right and you go out there, you might be able to come back. But when I say it's hit a little different, there were some reports that surfaced since that claimed that, many, not all, but many of these NXT releases were related to laziness when it came to training. No idea if there's any veracity to this story, if someone has a good source, but needless to say, the impression out there that maybe I am cut because I was lazy in my training did not sit well.
Yeah.
Did not sit well with many, and we've had some clapbacks over this story. In particular, Gigi Dolan and Cora Jade were among those who understandably took offense. Both took to their socials to refute claims of laziness when it came to training, both claiming they'd gone above and beyond, including training at gyms outside of their days training at the Performance Center. Jade went even further, though, claiming she had to do outside gym work after WWE's strength and conditioning program that they had set up for her was doing nothing for her other than getting her, and this is her quote, body shamed by her bosses, co-workers, and fans. That is quite a bombshell of an allegation, and probably means that Cora Jade is not going to be appearing back on NXT anytime soon. Maybe not even with TNA, since that is a partner for them. She did a lot of work with TNA, which is another reason why it was strange to see her among those cuts. But definitely some people being upset. Raleigh Osborne is another one who was called out in these reports that his being let go was not related to the laziness that was apparently part of some of the NXT releases. Many outlets, including the Wrestling Observer, were told that Osborne was let go for refusing to work with WWE's new Evolve brand, which many NXT are now doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I liked Raleigh Osborne just fine, but dude, you're not, you're
Right.
not John Cena here. You're probably not going to call your shots. Like, work, evolve, get in front of
Right.
as many people as you can.
Yes. Get your reps in.
Yeah, and that's
Of
another
course,
bridge
wasn't this the
probably
kid that
burned.
was injured when he was released because he
Yeah,
was difficult to work with, allegedly?
yeah. That was kind of the word that first started going around, is that his was not laziness but non-wrestling related things. And then
Hmm.
comes word that he wouldn't work evolve and maybe was just difficult to begin with. Again, we're not commenting on the truth or falsehoods of any of these allegations, just reporting that they're out there in the
Yep.
internet wrestling community, and these released talent are being forced to react to them in many instances. Well, speaking of bridges maybe being burned, maybe this is a good transition. Alberto Del Rio. This is a follow up because we touched last week on the AAA Mega Champion in our last show. And this week there were some conflicting reports, Doug. It got a little confusing, this news cycle, as to whether or not Del
Hmm.
Rio had in fact made nice and was signed by WWE to stay on at AAA. Some reports were claiming that this is what happened. Others were claiming the situation was more an instance of WWE looking at the contracts that they are acquiring as part of the acquisition of AAA, realizing that they were playing fast and loose down in Mexico with these contracts. These contracts
Hmm.
did not cover a lot of the things that WWE contracts do, and therefore they issued new contracts to these talents. So not necessarily a situation where, hey, we want to keep you, Alberto Del Rio, but you're the champion. We're inheriting your contract. Let's make it a ironclad contract of some sort.
Hmm.
Whichever is
Yeah.
the case, it's still interesting that he's obviously someone that, at least in the short term, is going to have to be part of WWE's at least
Hmm.
immediate plans with the brand. Um, the contracts that supposedly were redone or reoffered, or in many cases, if you want to believe the story, that these are people that WWE decided they wanted to keep and sign. In addition to Alberto, that list includes Hio de Dr. Wagner, Hio del Vikingo, the new La Parca, La Hesha, Lady Flamer, Lady Maravella, and Nino Hamburguesa.
Good job. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. That
Well
was
done.
hard. What's not hard though is Ben Kingo on that list, but because of
Yeah.
course you would. Like, why in the world would you not?
Well,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Why would you not? But yeah, I get it. They're transitioning to new ownership. They looked at the
yeah,
contracts and said, "Oh, these are ugly. Let's tighten these up, and then we'll figure out what's what later."
yeah. That makes way more sense than thinking that we see a future and money in Alberto Del Rio, because
Hmm.
quite honestly, this whole list of wrestlers, there are several on this list that are not going to be able to work American shows. And that was something that
Right.
came out, that these contracts aren't like meaning you're going to show up on WWE TV. This is probably just for AAA, just for Mexico. Although we are
Hmm.
already starting to see some elements of the ownership change. Rey Mysterio, for example, has been showing up via video on AAA programming, talking up the future of AAA is, high flying and bright now and all this kind of good
Hmm.
stuff. So the crossover stuff is starting, even though the deal is not completely done. Still exciting
Yep.
stuff, and very much
Absolutely.
interesting to watch. Um, if you've been wondering, well, actually, I got one more story before we get out of the idea of releases, and I know it's not the most pleasant thing to talk about. And before we just think it's WWE that are letting people go, it was revealed this past week that Tony Khan's Ring of Honor no longer employs the Righteous. Apparently, Vincent and Dutch departed the company quietly about a week ago, and it is just now coming to light. Reportedly, that situation, though, is one where they requested their releases.
So I wonder if, because Tony's not real good about giving people releases when he requests them. I wonder how that all worked out.
Well, apparently in the righteous's favors.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But I just
Or
wonder.
not that worried after WWE just releasing a bunch of people and then inheriting and signing
That's
and
fair.
acquiring a Mexican promotion. it could be a calculated instance of where are they going to go? Like, I'm not worried that they're going to show up on Raw.
Didn't really stop him from picking up Rusev and Aleister Black, bringing them back into the fold. But contracts come, contracts go. Whatever. It's
and
wrestling.
Maybe a difference in what the ceiling is on those various talents too. To be just fair about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been wondering about the whereabouts of Darby Allin, he's currently on Mount Everest.
Okay, I wondered if he was stuck in the snow somewhere.
The journey he's been talking about undertaking for years, the one that he's had to put off a time or two because of
literally being hit by a bus.
He began his journey more than a month ago. He posted video of himself May 5th doing a skateboard kickflip at 21,000, which apparently is a world record to do a kickback at that height. Mount Everest, though, more than 29,000 feet tall. So he has 8,000 plus more feet to go. He's already been traveling for a month. I imagine the last 8,000 ascent is the hardest part. So, and I doubt you're watching this up on Everest, Darby Allin, but if you are, good luck to you.
Good luck, and we have cats, so there's that. More reason to watch.
More reason to watch. Doug, I'm going to transition to something way less pleasant.
Okay.
Than cats. Michael Drosy. Do you remember? Does that name ring a bell?
It does not. Who is Michael Drosy?
Michael Drosy, better known to fans, wrestling fans of the 90s as Duke the Dumpster Drosy. You remember Duke the Dumpster Drosy?
I'm going to say I don't.
The wrestling garbage man?
It sounds like a early WWF gimmick from the 90s.
Duke the Dumpster Drosy was a wrestling garbage man. And now, though, he has been indicted by a grand jury.
Oh, dear.
In Warren County, Tennessee. The former WWE star from the 90s is accused of using Coinbase accounts in an attempt to purchase child pornography from the dark web.
No.
Yeah. Coinbase recognized what the transaction was. They declined the payment, alerted the FBI, who passed the tip along to the Warren County Sheriff's Department. A brief investigation led to Drosy's arrest. Because the transaction wasn't actually processed, the charge is considered attempted aggravated sexual exploitation of children. At the time of his arrest, here's another wrinkle. At the time of his arrest, Drosy was employed at as the DUI coordinator for the 31st Judicial District's Adult Recovery Court Program. Yeah. Drosy himself will be in court on May 28th.
Drosy got some explaining to do.
Let's end with something way more pleasant than that ugliness. But
yes, please.
Happy news. After all of this sad news and revolting news, we'll end on some happy news involving one of wrestling's good guys, Big E. This week, Big E got engaged. Did you hear this?
Good for Big E. I did not hear this, but good for Big E.
He is engaged to Chris Yim. Does that name sound any the last name?
Yeah, it does, but
yeah. It's the sister of WWE star Mia Yim.
Really?
So there's your happiness. The thought of Big E being related by marriage to Keith Lee just makes me very happy.
If only we could get Keith Lee back in action. We miss you, big guy. Come on.
Keith Lee, Big E, hanging out at the family barbecue. I mean, two of wrestling's coolest dudes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Makes me very happy, and also just congratulations to the couple on your engagement.
That's awesome. Good for them.
With that, we're hitting that main event, Doug.
Let's hit this main event.
I want to talk Backlash. Before we get into these spoiler territories of who won what, just the takeaways for those who maybe didn't catch the show, don't know the results, want to know if it's worth watching. Here's the good and bad of it from my mind, Doug, and I want your take. I think that it was a nice, crisp pay-per-view. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was as we anticipated last week. We had a lot of predictions we were right on because there wasn't a lot of chairs shuffling that we could see happening. So there really wasn't a lot of changes to make note. There's not a lot of newsworthiness coming out of the pay-per-view. If you take that part of it aside, as that's the glass half empty, and just look at the action, this was actually a pretty strong card. Most of the matches were pretty darn good. So if you have 2.5 hours, absolutely, it's a good wrestling show. If you're looking for, I want to make sure I don't fall behind on the storylines or any big shocks or changes, it's not an essential viewing from that point of view, in my mind.
Yeah, it's definitely not essential viewing from storyline wise, but yeah, a lot of good wrestling on here. Even the Orton and Cena match after it got out of first gear. 10 minutes of headlocks was just draining watching, but
for those of you that watched our WrestleMania coverage, that was a mixed bag of like some really high, performing matches, and then some things that in our mind did not perform well. For the most part, I think all these matches deliver, other than maybe delivering any surprises. So definitely a tight show that had the crowd hot all night. That crowd was hot all night.
Oh yeah. I mean the lineup, if you just look at it on paper, it's a great lineup, and I think it delivered for the most part across the board. Every match, I'll say this, every match did exactly what it was supposed to.
That's 2 thumbs up from the Two Bros Wrestling Show. If you just want to see a good wrestling program, definitely watch Backlash. Now let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it, because I do have some complaints about it, of course.
Let's start with the first match. We have our U.S. title match. It's a 4-way with Jacob Fatu, your champion, defending against LA Knight, Drew McIntyre, and Damian Priest. Doug, this is a hot way to start, first of all.
Yeah, it is.
And Fatu, we should say he is your winner. He retained, but let's talk about how everything got there. Right from the start, it is obvious. The crowd is just begging for Fatu to be the baby face. They chose him immediately amongst all these guys who are over. There were Fatu chants starting from the moment the bell rang, before anyone touched one another.
Yeah, and it just kind of like crescendos throughout to a point where, at one point you have two very much heels in Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu in the ring together, and the place just blows up when it's the two of them going head to head, which was great.
That was a moment. That was a good moment. And that's a good thing to point out, because the crowd really didn't heel on anyone. They just reacted to every spot. They chanted for Fatu, obviously. They gave "This is awesome" chants, but they were just into every frantic thing. And frantic would be maybe the way to talk about this one, because it was a spot fest, especially down the backstretch with finishers, everyone down. But McIntyre and Priest sort of take themselves out of it. They have this blood feud, this hatred, obviously. And by the fact they did that left it 1-on-1, allowed Solo to come in and save Jacob. And then we get maybe the only real surprise of the night.
But was it really?
Pretty good one.
It's a good one, but was it really a surprise? I mean,
the hottest free agent in wrestling.
What is it? Even though it's been signed since before WrestleMania?
Jeff Cobb is made his debut. And I loved Cobb from the moment I saw him back in the old Ring of Honor days. Jacob's reaction, though, was very much left that relationship ambiguous of like, I don't want this help. So you can sort of see where this is going, and I like where it's going, because Jeff Cobb.
I like where it's going. It seems like everybody that's Solo, with the exception of Jacob Fatu, everybody that Solo has brought in has had something very clumsy, like, because if you've never seen if you've never seen Tamatanga Tamaloa, you're like, who are these guys? Same thing with Jeff Cobb. It's like, who is this dude? He's a big dude. Who is this dude? Maybe quickly mistaken for, oh gosh, Jonah, not Jonah. What's he called? WWE, broke his ankles.
Oh, RVD. Appreciate you tuning in, Tony. We're sitting there talking the first match of Backlash and the debut of one Jeff Cobb.
Jeff Cobb, yeah.
it is obvious that Solo has a new project. Solo now can, to Jeff Cobb, do what he wasn't able to do with Fatu. And this gets us one step closer to that Fatu babyface turn that everybody's wanting. This gives Fatu someone to Solo to build somebody up that will end up being the thorn in the side of Fatu. And the thought of Jeff Cobb and Fatu going at it.
It's good stuff. It is good stuff. It just seemed a little clumsy to me, though. And I think there were like a lot of these clumsy, like we're going to overbook things. Not that this, I mean, anytime the bloodline's involved, it's kind of overbooked anyway. But this seemed like the first of many things that ended with some serious overbooking.
I didn't mind it, especially because it led to a big debut that they've been holding.
Right.
But I think it is a fair complaint as we move on through this card to see how many of these matches ended up with people interfering that were not part of the original match. You could do that once, twice, but it's
Right.
a repeat thing.
Yeah. And with the Fatal 4-Way where you have McIntyre and Priest take each other out. I was watching some wrap-up shows today and saw that McIntyre actually missed the table, and his head actually hit the concrete floor. So he was a bit backed up there. Oh yeah, definitely Tony Skittle. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is, again, the fans and their reaction. They want a reason to cheer for Jacob Fatu. And so the fracture that has been happening for a while, we saw the seeds planted for what the next storyline beat is there. And that is Jeff Cobb, because, he wasn't having it. And I don't want to do anything that the Samoan Werewolf does not want me to do. It's all I'm saying.
Sir. No.
Let's go to the next match, Doug. Let's talk about the Women's Intercontinental Championship match. Lyra Valkyria was taking on her mentor, Becky Lynch. And unlike the first match where the fans clearly picked, Jacob as the babyface, even though he's a heel, they very clearly turned on Becky. Even though she just came back last month, swerved everybody. They very much are in the Becky is a heel corner in St. Louis, as they really got behind Lyra.
They most certainly did, and I loved it. I thought this match was great, all the way through.
Physical.
He's very, very physical. I have zero complaints about this match. The only awkward moment for me is when Becky is trash talking Lyra's fiance. Who is this guy?
Is this your girl? I'm going to say that maybe the fiance, just by looking at him, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but maybe let's not do a mixed tag and get Seth involved. It might not turn out so well.
Exactly. We don't need that.
Early in the match, Becky tears her elbow up. They were working so stiff. She got some mat burn, obviously, there. And then I love that series of surfboards that Lyra did early in the match. I thought the execution on that was wonderful. And then, of course, the fiance gets involved. But they showed just this amazing intensity. I like the disarmor applications and reversals that ratcheted up the energy. A couple of manhandle slams didn't work out. And it sent the fans into this, the fans got into a second gear when the women hit the second gear. And this was the second straight match they got. This is awesome chance for the night. And then the great counters at the end with a kind of a surprise roll-up.
That devastating move, the surprise roll-up.
Which, for one of the few matches that ended clean, I guess that's one way to get the bigger star on the losing end.
And then Becky immediately gets her heat back, after the loss.
If you're sitting there unconscious on the mount because you got pinned, that part doesn't happen. If it's a roll up and you just look like, oh, this could have gone either way, that is how you do it. And that is how you get your heat back. I do think, though, not only was it a tremendous match, Doug, I want to point out that this is the second major pay-per-view that the old guard of Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair took the L's. So I think that we have a very obvious new women's evolution, as it were, going on
Yes.
here, a passing of the torch to a younger generation, because WWE right now is bursting with female talent.
It is an
At the
embarrassment of
same,
riches. Yeah,
yeah,
it really
but it
is.
was kind of a really cool moment. This was one of the matches I thought they might deliver a title change, just because I didn't see too much else. I was happy to be wrong about this one, because I think that the Intercontinental title has really helped Lyra, being the first and only champion up to this point, especially when she gets big wins like this.
Yes, yes. This puts not only her but her championship over. I love that.
And this clearly isn't over.
No, oh no, no,
Clearly
no.
isn't over, and absolutely, they are definitely passing the torch here. You saw it with Tiffany Stratton. You're seeing it now with Lyra on the NXT brand. You got Julia and just so much passing of the torch right now because of the level of talent that they currently have. Let's talk about our next championship match, Doug, and that is Dominic Mysterio defending his Intercontinental title against Penta. Obviously, the gear tribute to Psychosis at the first. I want to call that out because that just was awesome as an old school WCW fan that loved Psychosis back in the day. Doug, this is the second pay-per-view in a row that the fans chant for Dirty Dom.
Dom is awesome. I mean, Dom is a natural, and this had potential to just be so awesome. I hate the screwy like ending, but we've got the House of Purple involved in things here, so I get it, but
were you surprised? I mean, at WrestleMania, you get a contrarian crowd, an international crowd. Sometimes they want to root for the bad guys. In St. Louis, against Penta, one of the more popular wrestlers to debut in WWE in quite some time, the fans still rallied behind Dominic.
I like the St. Louis crowd, man. They get it. They really get it.
How sweet was that suicide dive into a DDT on the outside by Dom too? That was sweet. That was one of the better moves I've ever seen him pull off. Obviously, Penta is Penta. That Mexican destroyer on the ring apron truly looked like it was destroying Dom's neck. And then, as you mentioned, we get our second out of 3 matches thus far that had outside interference. And if you were betting if it would be Judgment Day or El Grande Americano, hey, you got both.
You got both, yeah. But you have Judgment Day and the tease again of another faction, breaking up, splitting apart, or at least fracturing here. Where okay, did Balor hesitate too long on purpose, or was that just a goof, to lead to wackiness
and
I don't
wackiness?
know.
It was obviously Penta is moving on to something with Chad Gable. And Dom, I guess, moves on to being the most over guy in all of Judgment Day.
Something eventually with Finn Balor, I'm sure, which will be great.
Which will be great.
And just when he hit Oblivion, that was great. Great little touch there. Dom pays very much attention to detail.
And let's pay attention to this detail. It's worth noting that Penta, who the big machine of WWE is obviously behind, has now taken 3 losses, 2 by pinfall. All 3 have been losses to Dominic Mysterio. One that he didn't take the pinfall was a multi-person match that Dom came out on top of at Mania. But still, you have 3 losses that Penta has racked up in his short time in WWE land. And he's been on the losing end of Dominic Mysterio all 3 times. There was a moment maybe a year and a half ago that very statement would have sounded quite ridiculous to most of us.
Man, Dom is great. He really is. And the crowds are starting to get behind him. We're going to see the same thing happen with Dom that's happening with Fatu, where, there's a bigger push for Dom to become a babyface, even though I think he has way too much fun working heel.
Yeah. Oh, he definitely enjoys it. But whether he wants it or not, it is coming. Yeah. Next match, Doug, the non-title contest, but this is the one that's personal, and this is the former world champ Gunther taking on Pat McAfee, the part-time wrestler, full-time announcer, full-time sports podcaster, and fan favorite. People just like, the dude is rallying for his partner, his broadcast partner, Michael Cole. He didn't always look like a wrestler in the ring. It wasn't always clean. That's fine because he's not a full-time wrestler. It was a methodical start to give fans an opportunity to react to all Pat's hope spots. And then, Gunther could have flat out squashed this, has been over in a couple of minutes, but instead the part that made it believable is the idea that Gunther was wanting to play with his food, and because he was messing around, it gave moments that Pat could conceivably get he's a kicker, get an athlete, get a kick in. He didn't try to do too much. He didn't try to showboat and do big spots that put some non-believability to someone who is not a wrestler coming in and taking out someone who is a known ring general the way Gunther is. And then, of course, as we could have expected, Michael Cole obviously would have to get involved. But I was actually fine with that because this was kind of personal for Michael Cole, and he made it known that this was personal for him. So his involvement made some sort of sense and honestly allowed Gunther to play around a little more, which allowed this match to be more than just a straight up squash. It added drama to it, which was what it needed.
This did everything it was supposed to do, like all these matches did at Backlash. This did everything it was supposed to do. It kept Gunther looking strong while giving the audience, like you said, McAfee got to hit all of his hope spots. But in the end, the right person, rightfully so, won here. And there was not a part-timer, not even a part-timer, when you do like one match every so often, you can't even be considered a part-timer. I don't care how much of an athlete you are. But this did everything it was supposed to, got the storyline pushed through, and even the afterwards, the aftermath of it that came afterwards, obviously. But where Pat McAfee's okay. Yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay.
I want to call this comment out because I was going to say the same thing, Tony, that Michael Cole's involvement meant there were times that Wade Barrett was the sole man on commentary. And I think my favorite part of that is not only was he able to convincingly carry a story by himself, but when it looked like the very end, the call of Pat McAfee's now being put to the sword, I'm like, that is perfect. That is absolutely perfect. To your point, Doug, not a 5-star match, but 5-star storytelling.
There you go. I'll agree with that. Absolutely. But it was never going to be a 5-star match. Was not supposed to be. It was exactly what it's supposed to be. And I'll absolutely agree. 5-star storytelling for sure.
Which leaves us with one, Doug. We go on to our main event, and that is the world title match of the Unseen 17 defending against Randy Orton. All right, we'll set this up. This match, it came so quickly after Backlash. You had to pull on history, and that's what they did. That's the hook for this.
A great job
between these two men. And they did a great job of it. I loved the graphics, the side-by-sides of how many world titles, how many Royal Rumble wins a piece, how many Money in the Bank ladder wins a piece. Like when you see and actually spelled out on your screen, it did give it some more importance that they honestly did not have quite the time to book and tell on television. We're all already supposed to know this if we've watched wrestling for the last 20-some years. And for that, I think they did a really good job in a situation where they did not have a whole lot of time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Everything was pulled together nicely. I was just not looking forward to seeing a Cena Orton, 75? Yeah. And knowing, how much time I saw that I had left for this match to potentially go, that kind of spooked me too. I was not, I'm like, here comes a whole bunch of rest holds, which is, we got a lot of that in like the first 10, 15 minutes or whatever. A lot of chin locks, a lot of that.
In fairness, this has been part of both these athletes' game for some time.
Yes.
And knowing that they're all on the north side of 40 now, it's also to be expected that I knew it would start slow and methodical. The crowd was very much into the hometown boy of Randy Orton.
Mhm.
And because of that, and just the story that they had built up about the history between these two, and this being the last time, they kept it old school simple, which was actually smart to do at the start. Because if you try to get overly clever, these two probably are not capable of that at this point in their career.
Right.
It did finally, in order to get the length they wanted it to, they had to start with the methodical and the rest holds and the chin locks and the
It
eye
really
pokes.
did. Yeah.
But once they got
But
into that other
eye
gear,
pokes, that was a great touch because, between the storytelling with the announcers, Cena, Orton, and then the announcers talking about how, okay, Cody wouldn't do that. Randy, on the other
yeah,
hand,
would go there.
yeah, absolutely. I did like that.
And
That was a nice
and
touch.
the fans were buying into it too, which is
Hmm.
also part of it. They were invested in this. Think back to the match at Mania and how the fans checked out of that one, and in this one they were into what they were doing. So play to the crowd. They did
Hmm.
end up picking up the pace with some vintage Orton spots with the draping DDT, the snap power slam that kept the
Yep.
crowd engaged on his chances to spot the obvious of what would be coming. Attitude
Hmm.
adjustment into the RKO. I thought that was clever.
That was
Got a
great. Yeah.
that was and that started another "This is awesome" chant, which is
Hmm.
something that no one was saying about
Yeah.
Cena Rhodes.
Yeah.
But
This was stars and stars above Cena Rhodes.
yeah,
Although John needs to stop calling his spots so obviously because that was a huge match. I'm
he's
like, are
running
you doing
wrestling,
this
Doug.
on purpose?
Let him run
Well, that's
wrestling.
what I really wonder. Is this part of his ruining wrestling, or is he just that like bad about calling spots? Like nobody's watching. I'm going to tell Randy what to do now. Stop it, John.
We get a ref bump.
No,
And
yeah.
then at least John Cena went for standard cheating with the ref bump, like going to get a
Hmm.
belt instead of bringing Travis Scott out or something. Um, Unfortunately, it was not the only ref bump we'd get because that ref gets up and he gets a second bump. And then a very long time happens before, you get the RKOs, your attitude adjustments. And then suddenly, finally, when it comes to, a dramatic point, the second ref finally is sent out to the ring. But apparently, WWE only had two refs still backstage. Everyone else went home.
They only had two refs, and like all their producers got RKO'd. So
That's right. I mean, you got two
you got to
refs.
sit where it
And the next thing
was.
you know, you got Nick Aldis, you got all the agents in the ring, everyone eating RKOs. It was a bunch of fan service for sure. It was the old school, like 2000, and I mean, if you're wanting to do callback to the ruthless aggression era, I guess this is another way to do it because famously, most
Mhm.
of those pay-per-views during that era would end in this what they would consider WWE main event style, which is a whole bunch of shenanigans, everyone
Uh-huh.
involved, fights into the crowd, shortcuts to, but these again, they're north of 40. They're, they probably could use a few shortcuts, and it would be something that maybe we could point out as a negative if it didn't work. In this case, I gotta
It
say,
worked. It
it worked.
did.
It was
It
an old
did.
school Randy Orton John Cena match that John Cena won, and to your point earlier, miles above what Cena and
Absolutely. Yeah.
what Cena and Rhodes managed to pull off. So, needless to say, John Cena retains. The hometown crowd was not happy. Obviously, it shows though too that going forward, smoke and mirrors, shenanigans. That's how Cena matches are going to get him through his pay-per-views from here on
Hmm.
out. I don't know how many other folks can do it as well with him as what Randy did because Cody didn't.
Cody sure could not.
Of course,
Cody
that
couldn't.
a lot of that was expectations of people thinking they're getting The Rock and getting Travis Scott instead. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was overbooked, but it was fun. What can I say? It was fun.
It was definitely overbooked. Everybody getting RKOs. It was kind of a throwback, I guess, to everybody eating a stunner back in the day.
Yeah.
But again, this entire pay-per-view did exactly every match on here did exactly what it needed to do to move things along, and that's always cool. We got Jeff Cobb and Jacob Fatu coming at some point. We're gonna have Dominic and Finn at some point, and Chad Gable and Penta. This push things forward, and Cena wants competition, so I expected somebody's music to hit then, but
I did too, especially with as much time as we still had left in the pay-per-view. But
mhm.
then knowing how long these things can be and how, draining a Mania weekend can be when you're watching 2 straight nights of 3+ hours, I actually wasn't so mad to see the credits roll at 2:30. I'm
Yeah,
like, that's kind of refreshing, the story
hmm,
told, exit out.
yep, done and done, crisp.
Exit out is what we're about to do, Doug. Let's hit that big finish.
Let's hit it.
All right, botch of the week.
I got to call it for what it is. That table that didn't break until like 10 minutes afterwards. And it really wasn't 10 minutes afterwards. But, Cena hits the table, bounces off the table doesn't break. It looks like Cena actually pushes it, and then it falls apart. The crowd popped for it, recognizing it for what it was, a botch. But, I'm going to keep that one light and say, yeah, Cena there botching that one. Or the table being rigged, the rigged table. Can it actually botch itself? I don't know.
My botch, just the fact that a pay-per-view without any title changes or surprise outcomes that you couldn't have predicted. The quick turnaround from Mania didn't do much favors for the booking choices they had to make. I don't fault them for making them. It just left it, if you were looking for some shock and awe and like wild turns, this was not the pay-per-view for you.
Yeah.
Performer or performance of the week?
I'm going to give it to Jeff Cobb because as much as I thought his introduction was a little clumsy, and historically, when Solo brings somebody in, especially from New Japan, it doesn't work out that well. But I like what this, it's great for Jeff Cobb, and it's great for Jacob Fatu as well, because we're going to get to see some big beefy boys throwing down soon enough.
We are definitely going to see some big beefy boys throwing down, and I cannot wait for that. My performance of the week is, despite what I said about my botch and the fact that there was no surprises, performance is credit to the crisp pacing of this one. I mentioned it earlier,
Yeah.
the whole thing, 2.5 hours. And for that 2.5 hours, the St. Louis crowd brought it for every match. So maybe I'm giving it to St. Louis.
Yeah, maybe
Lots
so.
of. When was the last time you saw most of the matches on any given pay-per-view earn This Is Awesome chance? They were into everything. And
Everything.
sometimes, whether it's the things we can nitpick about no surprises, no changes, slow pacing, shenanigans and tricks outside interference, when you have the crowd, sometimes things play different if you do the right thing in front of the right audience. This was the right audience, apparently, for what they were
Yes,
doing, because they
it
allowed
worked.
a lot of grace in that main event. They allowed grace in the Pat McAfee stuff, not always being crisp, but being
Hmm.
believable. They elevated every match on this pay-per-view. So
Yeah,
kudos to you, St. Louis.
absolutely.
And Doug, match of the week.
So, I always keep it within the pay-per-view when we do these reviews. So I got to say, I loved every single thing about Lyra Valkyria and Becky Lynch. That was a match worthy of a match of the week when you were looking at a pay-per-view. That was great. Great stuff, top to bottom. I have no complaints other than, the awkwardness of involving the fiance. But to your point, they shouldn't be doing any mixed tags anytime soon with Becky and Seth. I don't think that's a good idea.
Maybe it stood out because it was one of the matches that did have a clean finish.
Hmm.
But also there were stakes here, and not just the title, because there were a lot of
Yes.
titles on the line tonight. But this was one where I actually thought they'd go the other way with it because it's safer to put the belt back on Becky. They managed to tell a story that didn't have Becky lose anything, didn't look like she was dominated, but Lyra held her own with her mentor
Hmm.
and gained a lot more in victory than just about anything she's. This was the match of not just the night. This is the match of Lyra's career up to this point. I thought this was the best she'd ever looked. Obviously, it helps to be in the ring with a general like Becky Lynch, but they brought it. Absolutely. I'm with you. That was my favorite match of the night.
Totally did bring it.
And with that, as we see, it is getting dark, so it must be time to say good night. It's time to, we'll give you a few extra minutes to call your mother if you haven't yet. If you do join us on our for our live broadcast, which are usually on Sundays at 8 on YouTube, we are not on live this Sunday. We are doing a midweek show. We'll be back live with you for the next time on May 22nd. We're doing this to get it closer to the weekend so that we can prove, we can preview for you all AEW's Double or Nothing. And we're right on the verge of that on the holiday weekend. So we'll be live on that Thursday, May 22nd. And then we'll be back in June for all kinds of great shows and lots of pay-per-views that we
lots
preview.
Of pay-per-views.
Yeah, including the very first taste that we'll all be getting of WWE's AAA acquisition. And so that is going to be a very, very interesting time. We appreciate that. We appreciate all of you for watching.
Thank you, Tony.
Give us a subscribe, a like, comment. We appreciate it. We'll come back and answer everyone for certain. And until then, come join us again on the 22nd.
Go watch your mom and call some wrestling. That's not right. Go watch some wrestling and call your mom. Good night, everybody.